Our next lesson is lesson 20, and that is multiplying with decimals. Go ahead and write the title down in your notes and push play when you're ready to begin. Okay, so I want to just kind of go over a little bit of why we move these decimals around in multiplication, and then I'll show you how we move them around to make it easy. So I put an example here. If I did 1.3 plus 1.3 plus 1.3, and I did that with the skills that I used on my last lesson, then I would just line everything up and add it together, and I would get 3.9. If we do multiplication, I'd have 3 times 3, which is 9. And notice I didn't line up my decimals. There's no decimal showing, so it's hanging out in the shadows. I didn't line them up because I'm multiplying and distributing it out. I'm not adding to the place values to each other straight up and down. I'm distributing out that number, so I don't really need to line those up. And 3 times 1 is 3. Over here I had the 1 decimal in there, so I go ahead and mark it. 1 decimal in. That works. I mean, the 1 decimal in works just fine if there's no decimal in this number here, or if the decimal's hiding in the shadows at the very, very, very end of the number. However, it gets all messy and messed up if we're multiplying it times something that has a decimal in it as well. Because now I'm not multiplying it or adding it together 3 whole times. I'm adding it together not even a full time. So this is going to be a smaller number than it started out to be. So it becomes really confusing when you have multiplying with decimals if you don't learn how to do the little trick that fixes it all for you. So most people just learn how to multiply with decimals with a little trick so that you don't have to try and ponder out, oh, I've got to divide 1.3 times 0.3, then add it together. You know, it's just messy. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the trick, and I'm going to give you some steps to do this with. So we'll go on to the next slide so you can copy those down. Okay, and I'm going to put the steps in there and have you write those down in your notes as I walk you through each of the steps on an I do problem. So notice first of all that when I set this up, yes, in the last lesson in add and subtract, we were all about line them up, make sure they line up and everything. But again, because we're using distributive property here, we don't have to do that. So what we do is we just go ahead and push everything over to the farthest side, and then we just do our math like normal. So the first step is a skill that you learned way back a couple years ago, and then we reviewed at the beginning of this year, and that is just ignore the decimals and just multiply like normal. So we would do, remember we would do the 2 first. So it's 2 times 4 is 8, and then 2 times 2 is 4, and then 2 times 3 is 6. We're done with the 2. We have a placeholder. Notice I'm still ignoring those decimals. I have not even looked at them. They're all trying to get my attention, and I'm like, no, I'm not looking at you. So now I pass out the 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. And that's done. Now I add them together. Still ignoring those decimals. No, I'm not looking at you, decimals. Alright, so then I just add those up. 8 plus 0 is 8. 4 plus 4 is 8 also. 6 plus 2 is 8 also. I didn't even plan that. And 3 plus nothing is 3. Okay, decimals, now I'll give you some attention. Now that I've multiplied like normal all the way down to the answer, notice I did not put any decimals in here. None. Don't put any decimals in there. They try to trick you. Just ignore them. Get all the way down until you have an answer, and then you will do the next step. Okay, there's the next step. Count the decimals in from right to left. Go ahead and pause and write that down, and then play, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so when I say count the decimals in from right to left, what I mean is in this number, I'm going to count how many times from right to left that I go across before I get to that decimal. So I'm going to go across 1, 2 numbers. I went across 2 numbers, so I'm just going to put 2 there for myself. And then I'm going to do the same thing in this number down here to see how far it took me to get to that decimal. 1 spot. It only took me 1 spot, so I'm going to write a 1. And then I will add those together. This is the third step, so let me have you write down the third step. Okay, and so you're going to add those two together right here. 2 plus 1 is 3, and I'm going to put it right down here, 3. Okay, and that takes us to the fourth step. And the fourth step is to count those 3 decimals from the same direction, from right to left, into the answer. So I need to go from here and go across 3 spots. 1, 2, 3, stop, and there my decimal will go. So I put the decimal right there. And that would be the answer. Okay, so I've got the steps there in front of us, and we're going to multiply together. And this is a we do, so be sure you're copying down as we go. We're going to multiply 24.3 times 1.34. So I would start by writing down 24.3 times 1.34. Remember, I do not have to line up my decimals like I do in add and subtract. I just line up the side there, and that's fine. Decimals can be wherever. Remember, I'm going to ignore them for a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I start with the 4, and I ignore these guys for right now. 4 gets passed out to all of these, just like we did before. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16, plus 1 is 17. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Ignoring those decimals still. I don't want to look at you decimals. I'm not even looking at you decimals. And now I'm going to go on to the 3. Remember, that's 3, 0, because you need 3 to get to the end. So 1 over means 1, 0. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6, plus that 1 is 7. And I'm done with the 3. Still ignoring those decimals. I don't even want to look at your decimal. Alright, the next one, it's 2 spots to get to this one, so I'm going to go ahead and put 1, 2 placeholders. And now 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. And I add those together. No decimals here. No, no, no. No decimal there. Alright, then 2 plus 0 is 2. 7 plus 9. 16 plus 0 is 16. 9 plus 1 is 10. Plus 2 is 12. And plus 3 more is 15. 7 plus 1 is 8, plus 4 more is 12. 2 plus 1 is 3. Alright, now I have completed step 1, multiply like normal, ignoring all my decimals. And so now that I have a final answer, I'm going to go to step 2, count the decimals in on the multipliers from right to left. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to count in how far in did I go before I got to the decimal here. Well, I went across one number, so I went 1. So I just put 1. Then I count here, how many numbers did I go across to get to the decimal here? And I went across 2 numbers to get to the decimal, so I put 2. And that's step 2. Now I'm on step 3. Add that together. So I'm adding those 2 together. 1 plus 2 is a 3. So I'm going to put a 3 down here just to tell myself how many decimals I go in. And now I'm on step 4. Count that amount into the answer from right to left. So I'm going to go across the answer. I'm counting 3 in. Starting from here, I go 1, 2, 3, and I put the decimal there. So the answer to 24.3 times 1.34 is 32.562. Well, let's try a you do. You might get stuck along the way, and I've got the steps there in front of you. So at the point you get stuck, push play until I catch up with you, and then try to continue. Then pause me and try to continue from there. So it will be like a you do, sort of a we do. I'll catch you where you get stuck. So push pause and try to do this one, and then push play if you get stuck. Okay, here we go. If you got stuck, then let me see if I can catch up with you and help you through. So I am going to do a step 1, multiply like normal, ignore the decimals. So I'm going to go through and do 2 times 5, which is 10. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 2 times 4 is 8. Cross off that one. Go to the next one, and since I have to cross over 1 to get there, I need to put the placeholder there. And now I do 1 times 5, which is 5. 1 times 3, which is 3. 1 times 4, which is 4. Add those together. No decimals so far. I'm ignoring you decimals. And I still am on this part because I have to finish out my problem. I have not finished the problem. So I do 0 plus 0, which is 0. 7 plus 5, which is 12. 8 plus 3 is 11 plus 1 is 12. And 1 plus 4 is 5. And now I have finished step 1. I have multiplied like normal, ignoring the decimals completely. Step 2, count the decimals in on the multipliers from right to left, from right to left. So starting here, I'm going to count across 2 spots to get to the decimal. So I'm going to, over here, I'm going to write a little 2. 2 took me 2 spots. On this one here, I count across 1 before I get to the decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1. Step 3 says add those together. So I'm going to add those 2 numbers together, and that's a 3. That seems to be my number of this lesson. It's not always going to be 3. Just keep that in mind. And so now I'm on the last step that says count that amount into the answer. So I'm going to go across here 1, 2, 3 spots, and that lands me right there. So I put my decimal right there. So 4.35 times 1.2 is 5.220, or just 5.22 since that 0 is not sandwiched in. And that is the answer. If you still need to review this a little bit or see the examples a couple more times, use the rewind button. If you want some practice aside from, if you need some help from me afterwards, then and I'm available, please come see me. And if you feel like you're ready to do the closure questions on this, go get the closure questions and show me that you know how to do this. See you soon.